Good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Medina. I am the Communications Director at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. We are your hosts for today's webinar. I want to welcome you all to our webinar that analyzes the economic impact from World Energy's investment in a new biofuel production facility and its future operations in Paramount, California. World Energy in Paramount is the first U.S. conversion of a legacy petroleum refinery into a clean energy renewable biorefinery, creating sustainable aviation fuel. Throughout the webinar, you will hear sustainable aviation fuel referred to as SAF, just to give you a heads up. Like I said, today you will hear from us about the economic impact. Our director of the Institute for Applied Economics, Shannon Sedgwick, will outline some of the key highlights from our report. Following Shannon's presentation, we will have a panel discussion hosted by Stephen Chung, COO of the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation and President of the World Trade Center Los Angeles. Stephen will be joined by Israel Garcia, Legislative Assistant for Representative Lucille Roybal-Allard, whose district includes Paramount, Gene Gibelis, CEO of World Energy, who commissioned the report and whose facilities economic impact we will be discussing today, and Aaron Robinson, Senior Manager for Environmental Sustainability at United Airlines, which also completed its first passenger flight using 100% undiluted aviation fuel last year. During the panel discussion, we will be monitoring the chat feature, so please submit any questions through that feature, and we will forward it on to our moderator as well as our panelists. And again, thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Shannon.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Shannon Sedgwick, the Director of the Institute for Applied Economics at the LADC. We were approached by World Energy to conduct an economic impact analysis of their conversion of the Paramount refinery to produce renewable fuels. Our analysis quantifies the total economic activity, direct, indirect, and induced, related to the reconfiguration and expansion of the refinery from 2020 through 2023, and annual ongoing operations over a 6-year period from 2019 through 2024. World Energy is a global supplier of low carbon intensity energy solutions. For more than 2 decades, World Energy has been a national and international provider of biomass-based diesel, and in the last 5 years has added sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, and other renewable biofuels to its product portfolio. Their production process uses inedible waste products from the food and agricultural industries and turns them into clean energy for planes, heavy-duty vehicles, and public transit. World Energy acquired the Paramount facility and associated pipeline systems in March of 2018 and announced they would be making an additional investment to complete the facility's conversion into a 100% renewable and sustainable aviation fuel operation. Beyond the environmental benefits of biofuel and low or zero carbon fuel adoption, there are positive economic impacts from biofuel production operations, the related investments, and many supporting activities in the economy. This is realized in the form of green jobs providing labor income, contributions to regional gross output, tax revenues which support delivery of services to communities, and large indirect and induced economic benefits. Before we dive into the Paramount refinery and its economic activity, let's take a few moments to discuss why this conversion is so important. As solutions are sought to address both global climate change and regional air pollution, there's increasing awareness of the need for lower carbon fuels that are sustainably derived, and this is especially true in the transportation sector. Transportation accounts for 41% of all greenhouse gas emissions in California. As local, state, and federal interest in reducing emissions intensifies, and the public and private sector demand innovative solutions to demonstrate efforts against climate change, the green energy market will continue to experience rapid growth and increased diversification. The Renewable Fuels Project at World Energy Paramount includes investments made to retrofit and modernize equipment, increase workplace safety and mitigate negative impacts of operations to surrounding communities, and offer employment opportunities at a green energy facility. World Energy Paramount is the first U.S. conversion of a legacy petroleum refinery into a clean energy renewable biorefinery. When completed, this capital investment will allow for 25,000 barrels per day of renewable fuels to meet increasing local demand for low carbon intensity fuels for commercial motor vehicles, including trucks and heavy duty vehicles and aviation. World Energy will complete the Paramount refinery conversion and reconfiguration, enhancing the facility to produce 100% renewable fuel and hydrogen fuel. Project expenditures for the renewable fuels project will include raw materials, process units, support units, wastewater treatment, utilities, and products and logistics. Capital investment spending is expected to reach $2.0 billion over the span of 4 years from 2020 through 2023. An estimated 40% of this spending will occur at businesses in California, with the remaining expenditures made throughout the rest of the U.S. The LADC estimates the $2 billion in direct investment at the Paramount facility to complete the expansion and reconfiguration under the Renewable Fuels Project will produce a one-time impact of $1.7 billion in total output, $1.4 billion in total labor income, and just under $200 million in total federal, state, and local taxes. Capital expenditures from 2020 through 2023 are estimated to support more than 2,100 total jobs in California. After the conversion is complete, California will be home to one of the largest advanced renewable fuel producers and the world's first SAF facility. It will take until 2024 for World Energy to ramp up production to achieve the Paramount Complex's design capacity. During this time, the ongoing economic impacts associated with World Energy annual operations at Paramount will fluctuate. Inputs for the analysis of annual ongoing operations included expenditures on feedstock, hydrogen, and other variables, and fixed costs and operating costs. The breakdown of these costs are shown as a percentage of total costs on this slide across the 6 years of operations analyzed. The total economic impact of World Energy Paramount extends beyond their direct operational expenditures. Wages paid to the staff and payments made for purchases of goods and services circulate throughout the economy, generating additional indirect and induced activity. Through these effects, total output generated by World Energy operations will grow from $608 million in 2019 to an estimated $2.4 billion in 2024. That's for a total of $7 billion in economic output in California over the 6-year period. The total fiscal contribution across all 6 years is estimated to reach $469 million. With the ramping up of production, total jobs supported by World Energy operations in Paramount will grow from more than 1,300 to over 5,300, with an associated labor income of over $1.1 billion. These employment impacts diffuse across multiple industries, including trade, transportation and utilities, waste management and remediation, and agriculture. World Energy's ongoing activities and expanded business footprint in Paramount could provide immediate and near future solutions to local, regional, and state ambitions concerning climate change, emissions reduction, and public health. By increasing its capacity to deliver renewable fuels to the Southern California region, World Energy provides lower and zero emissions solutions to the local port and airport operators that can use these biofuels today. Renewable biofuels help provide a diversified offering of solutions to address regional and state climate and air quality goals. Set by local regulators, these goals promote public health and environmental sustainability and secure critical state and federal infrastructure funding. If you're interested in diving deeper into the impact of World Energy Paramount and the role they have in helping meet California's climate and environmental goals, you can find the full report on the LADC website. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shannon. Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Chung. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, also known as LADC. I'm also the president of the World Trade Center Los Angeles. Greetings from Washington, D.C. I'm actually here in D.C. for the Select USA Investment Summit, where we have about 3,700 attendees from around the world looking to invest into the United States, specifically California and Los Angeles as well. And this is a very timely conversation because over the last 3 days, we've been hearing so much about the international attention and interest into sustainability and the various development that's been happening around Los Angeles and California, demonstrating that we are leading the way in many different ways, and specifically on SAF that we'll be talking about today. As we're going to go into this conversation with some of our panelists, I want to set the stage in terms of some of the things that Shannon said earlier. With Los Angeles around this region and also throughout California, I think more and more so over the last few years, you have seen and you've heard the interconnectedness and also the dependency on the logistic and transportation sector here in California and Los Angeles. And with Los Angeles having the #1 and #2 container ports, controlling over 40% of all ocean-going cargo coming into the United States, we're having a lot of direct impact, not only on the trade and logistics sector, but also on the environment as well. Additionally, the Los Angeles World Airport controls LAX, which prior to the pandemic was the 3rd busiest airport in the world, with approximately 90 million passengers coming in and out of Los Angeles every single year and moving over $100 billion worth of goods per year through LAX. Combined together, Los Angeles Customs District is the #1 customs district in the United States, trading about $450+ billion a year with the rest of the world. And there's a huge dependency on fuels and the supply. And that's why we're delighted today to really get into details of SAF and also lower carbon fuels that will be transforming this entire industry and understanding the impact that it's going to have on our economy as well. At LADC, we really focus on sustainability, resiliency, and equity. And so a lot of the things that Shannon talked about earlier really talk about the investment from World Energy, but also we have to look at the entire supply chain to see the end users like United Airlines and other partners in terms of what their needs are. So I'm excited to bring together this great panel over the next 30 minutes or so to really dive into these questions. I want this to be an engaging process as well. So I really encourage the audience member to use the Q&A function. Please type in your questions. And as I'm going through some of the questions with the speakers, would love to be able to get some of your comments and some of your questions answered as well. With that said, I want to introduce our speakers. I think Alex earlier gave you their quick intro, but I want to introduce Mr. Gene Gabolas, the CEO for World Energy. And he has a distinguished background. I really encourage you to all look at their bio to see how impressive their work has been. But since 1996, Gene has played a pioneering and leading role in building today's $136 billion global biofuels industry. And in 1998, he launched World Energy to drive positive change by accelerating the commercialization of viable alternatives to fossil motor fuels. And so today we're going to hear more about the World Energy project in Paramount and also about the entire supply chain as well. So welcome, Gene. Additionally, I want to also introduce Mr. Israel Garcia, who will be joining us very shortly. He's the legislative assistant from Representative Roybal Allard's office, and he's focused on energy policy. And Representative Roybal Allard's been a leader in environmental policy and also energy policy as well. So they play a significant role, and we're interested and very delighted to have Israel join us today. And last but not least, we have Mr. Aaron Robinson from United Airlines that will be joining us. And Aaron has managed United Airlines Eco Skies program since 2016. And as Alex already mentioned before, he has done many great things. And one of the great accomplishments is that he created the Eco Skies Alliance, the world's largest corporate customer sustainable aviation fuel program, and organized the first 2 airline flights to use 100% SAF. So with this expertise, I'm excited to get this going right away to dive right into some of the questions. So welcome to our panelists. Welcome, Gene. Welcome, Aaron. And welcome, Israel. So we're going to get started with the first set of questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into ask Aaron, if you don't mind. The first question goes to you. As I was mentioning before, United Airlines has already done a number of different things in terms of SAF, and United Airlines has made a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050. And United has also been far outspending other airlines in making this a reality. Can you tell us a bit more? What does the future of sustainable aviation fuel look like in the aviation industry?
Thanks, Stephen. I'm happy to be with you here today and to share certainly our story, but then also I think it's really a shared story of one and the work we've done together with World Energy, in fact, over the last several years. We've had a number of firsts in the space, from in 2016 being the first ongoing use of SAF really in the entire world, to advancing it forward over the next few years, having the longest transatlantic SAF flight, our flight for the planet, where we paired up sustainable fuel with all sorts of changes to our onboard product on board to really demonstrate what was possible. And then I think really culminating actually last year with, as you mentioned, those pair of 100% SAF flights that we did. And all of those flights really we did using World Energy produced SAF. So really excited by the work that we've done together over the last few years. In terms of where we're going as a whole, this has been a challenge that we've had for years, and really it's going to be a challenge that we're going to be working on over, in fact, the next few decades. For us, in terms of broader sustainability and how we decarbonize as an airline, SAF is going to have a huge key role for it. It's not that we're not trying to move away from using fuel at all. We're working, and we have investments, in fact, into electric and hydrogen powered aircraft. But those fuels, those alternatives are going to take decades really before they're able to power the longest flights, the largest capacity aircraft we have. And so the aircraft we're buying today and that we have on order today, we're going to be using them for decades to come. And so we are going to need SAF for decades to come as well. So it is really, I think, the biggest lever as we look at our decarbonization is sustainable aviation fuel, and the one that we look to really drive that biggest change.
Thank you, Aaron. I have more questions about this. I'm going to come back to you, but Jean, I was taking copious notes as Shannon was talking about this first U.S. conversion project that's going to really transform the way that we look at SAF. And from LADC's perspective, where we're really focused on job creation as well, to hear that the investment is going to create up to 5,300 jobs. That's a huge impact, especially during COVID. LA County, a lot of people didn't know this, but the first 2 months of the COVID pandemic, LA County alone lost 772,000 jobs. And 2 years into it, we're still 290,000 jobs short of where we were before. So to hear that there's going to be a new sector that's going to create all these amazing jobs, that's really exciting to hear. So Jean, can you talk about this particular project in Paramount as the first of its kind to use sustainable, to create sustainable aviation fuel? How are you seeing the industry changing from fossil fuel to a green energy, and not just for the climate crisis, but also for employment impact as well? Jean? Sorry, you're on mute.
Let's see, there you go. How are we doing now? All right, terrific. Thanks, Stephen. Great to be here, and thank you for hosting, and more importantly, for doing the work on the economic impacts of the project that we're doing in LA. Aaron, thanks for the support from United for I guess 6 years now and counting. So the project itself is a critical first step to a much larger transition from traditional fuels to the lower carbon fuels that we're going to need going forward. These first steps are really critical ones. And I think it's a symbolic thing that we're able to go into a traditional fossil fuel refinery and permanently repower that facility to produce 100% renewable fuels that are dramatically lower in their carbon impacts. So we're providing for our customers fuels that are as much as 80% lower on carbon. This is a huge investment, $2 billion investment in center of Paramount in southeastern LA County will have, as has been noted, a tremendous economic impact, and very importantly will provide very good paying jobs to workers, not only during construction but long afterwards. So economic impacts are critical. That's why we worked closely with you to identify what those are, and I think those are outlined in more detail in the report. But just to kick things off, I want to talk about how important this first step is to the second and the third and the next steps, and where this all goes over time. I think Aaron made the point well that these are long-term commitments. They have been long-term commitments. They continue to grow in their scale, and we will have to continue to evolve in our technological advancements. So this isn't a matter of building a facility and then kind of flipping the switch and operating it like that. Southern California is going to continue to evolve away from fossil fuels and towards the cleaner fuels of the future, including hydrogen. We're very involved in the transition to cleaner forms of transportation fuels, including green and blue hydrogen. And so this facility will continue to be a source of innovation and growth for a long time to come. Happy to get into it further, but I saw we have Israel on the line now, so let's great to have you, Israel, and let's bring them into the discussion.
Thanks so much, Gene. And I have a lot more questions for you, especially as you're mentioning hydrogen. We'll jump into it. But I also want to highlight, as you're talking about your $2 billion investment into this particular project, one of the stats that Shannon was referring to earlier is that it's going to have a total of over $19 billion of economic output and impact throughout the United States. I want to bring back that point is that the investments, what's happening in Los Angeles is not going to just stay in Los Angeles. It's going to have national effect. And this transitions very nicely into Israel. So Israel, welcome. So glad to have you here. We're kind of setting the stage earlier, really talking about how, within Los Angeles being the center for international trade for the nation, as we're looking at the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, and number 1, number 2 container ports in not only North America, but the Western Hemisphere, controlling 43% of ocean-going cargo coming into the United States, with LAX being the 3rd busiest airport in the world, with over around 90 million passengers coming in and out. There's going to be a lot of business opportunity, but at the same time, a lot of potential and also historic environmental impact. So while there's obviously a global climate benefit, your district includes Paramount, a city where the residents were previously impacted from the public health standpoint. And this conversion of this plant can potentially reduce a lot of harmful pollutants, somewhere between 80 to 100%, depending on what you're talking about, whether it's NOx or SOx. And so how do you see the conversion of not only this facility, but the future similar facility can benefit not only the public health in your area, but also across other locations as well?
Thank you for the introduction. I just have a few words to say. First of all, on behalf of the Congresswoman, she definitely sends her regards. We are in the midst of appropriation markups, so we'll be running all over the place today. She definitely sends her regards. She wishes she could be here, but thank you to everybody here and distinguished guests for putting this event together. And just to kind of answer your question, I know prior to World Energy purchasing the facility in 2018, these are definitely concerns and issues that we heard from constituents of the health impacts of what Paramount residents were experiencing and breathing day and night. And so we are definitely very, very happy to have World Energy in the district. And the Congresswoman had the opportunity to meet with Gene in December. It was the day that you folks had the flight, if you remember, Gene, from Chicago to Washington, D.C. And so we were definitely very excited that took place. And on the Congresswoman's, you folks can definitely count on her support for these pieces of legislation, anything that they can do to improve the lives for the residents of Paramount.
Great, thank you, Israel, and we thank the Congresswoman for her leadership. And as you're talking about appropriation, I was mentioning earlier, I'm here in DC right now for the Select USA Summit. So, and then before that, we were actually here for the EDA Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant. So we know that there's going to be additional funding that's coming from the federal government into the local regions, especially when it comes to transportation, also infrastructure. And as Jean was mentioning, I'm going to come back to you at especially the hydrogen aspect. I want to talk a little bit about potential hydrogen hubs around the nation, what that means for the future. So want to thank you for joining us, but we'll come back to you with a number of different questions. But going back to Aaron, as you started, you're talking about this is one of many steps, and Jean reverberated that question, that comment, and it's going to be a long process in order for us to basically get to this point of some of the very ambitious goals that we have. Can you talk a little bit more about the pressure points and also the opportunities? What can we do to help implement and improve the adoption of SAF, not only from the Los Angeles, but throughout the nation and throughout the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And you say pressure point, I think that's really the right word, is the pressure is only increasing and only growing. And in particular, we saw this accelerate instead of slow down during the pandemic. I mean, I was in Los Angeles in May of 2020, and I remember there was not a lot of noise from traffic, or certainly from having a lot of aircraft in the skies. The skies were actually pretty clear. There was not a lot of smog, and people were really, I think, unwilling to give a lot of those things back that they had taken for granted previously, and rightly so. So we're seeing that pressure really across the board in this direction. In terms of what more can be done, I mean, this has been in some ways a fast growing and fast advancing space, but then also in some ways a rather slow growing one. And what we need ultimately is we need a lot more adoption, in fact. And in particular, we've got legislation that we've been pushing for, both at the congressional level, but then certainly also in Sacramento, that can really, in fact, help enhance the space by providing funding that helps other companies like World Energy make an investment case, make a business case that's successful, and get what they need to have off the ground. One of the things I think that is actually underreported, I think, in this report is around, in fact, that economic impact and the job creation. At my university, where I went, the tagline is "What starts here changes the world." And certainly with World Energy, we've been able to do that. And these days it's, World Energy was the first to go in this space. We're up to 2 producers globally now, but there's dozens more startups that are working to do the same thing and create that same kind of impact. And so that's really exciting for us. It's really exciting for the industry. And we need to see more of that, in fact, and certainly additional government support, direct support in this space can help make that happen and make it a reality.
Thank you, Aaron. And I see that the questions are starting to come in the Q&A. So thank you for that, Jimmy, for your first question. So I encourage other folks to start bringing it in. I'll start incorporating some of those questions. This is actually just open to the full group, whoever wants to answer this. We're talking about funding, and obviously to convert this, it's $2 billion World Energy, Jean, that you guys are investing, and to be the first is always going to be a challenge, right? So what are some of the funding opportunities that you guys are seeing down the line that can be utilized, can be leveraged, so that we can make this transition a bit quicker? Because you're mentioning it's going to take multiple steps. And again, thank you for Jean for being the first. But how do we incentivize other folks to basically do more as well? Oh, Jean, you're mute again.
How many times am I going to do that before I realize, right? It's a great question. Listen, the species has never faced a challenge as big as the one it faces now. And if we don't recognize that this is not business as usual, then we're missing the point. There are going to have to be lots and lots and lots of firsts. One of the things I think that's really important is that we all serve our customers. Our suppliers are absolutely critical to our success. We work really hard to help our customers be able to deliver to their customers. And what's really interesting now in leading companies around the world is that they recognize that they don't only have an obligation to put out their products, but they have an obligation to put out their products more sustainably. And whether that's leading companies like Google and Meta and McKinsey or whoever the company is that strives every day to have a leadership position in their industry, they are going beyond what is mandated. They're going beyond what they're being told to do by regulators. And I think that's really what the scale of this problem requires, is that companies like Aaron's are going to choose to lead. This future is going to be created by those who are not waiting for the governments to act. They are not waiting for their competitors to act. They're willing to go and create what needs to be created to do whatever the activity is in their industry more sustainably. And for aviation is such an important industry. It's what brings us together. It's how we connect. Do any of us really think that we're going to have better global integration without aviation? Do most of us live, many of us live a long way away from our families? Are we not going to really connect with our families? We need aviation. Aviation is absolutely central to modern living, but we need to do it in a much more sustainable way. And so, yes, governments have a big role to play in that, and funding agencies have a big role to play in stimulating this kind of activity. And certainly the low carbon fuel standard in California is a big reason why we are building this business in Southern California. And the California Energy Commission has been a significant contributor to all of the firsts that we're doing at our site in LA. But it's all a big partnership. It's a big supply chain partnership. And even Aaron's customers are Aaron's customers aren't even the end of the line. It's their customers. It's Nike doesn't consume its own sneakers. It's it's all the way back from the consumer to the company, to all the companies that service that company, in which we're really starting to see really serious steps being taken towards decarbonization. And we're just a small part of that. We have an obligation to innovate together. This is not meant to be the sustainable aviation fuel of forever. It's the best sustainable aviation fuel we can produce right now. So it's critical that we do that. But it's also critical that we continue to innovate and develop the e-fuels of tomorrow, taking captured carbon and combining it with green hydrogen and creating fuels that are basically carbon, that are significantly carbon negative, so that we can really create an environment in which we can make net zero real.
Thank you for that, Gene. Israel, it's a follow-up question to kind of the funding aspect. Again, we've seen so many things that are happening from the federal government standpoint to really support the recovery effort. And we see that the future of aviation, the future of transportation is going to be huge. Hearing, additional information from Secretary of Transportation as well as Department of Energy. Can you talk a little bit about, from the federal perspective, are there any programs, any other opportunities that we should be keeping an eye out for in terms of being able to help us transform this industry?
Yeah, I think the notice that Department of Energy put out earlier this month with regards to good paying jobs with hydrogen hubs, that's a really good opportunity right there. We have $8 billion to develop regional clean hydrogen hubs or H2 hubs across the country. And with what's being done in Paramount, especially with what World Energy is doing, they're leading the way, setting the foundation for what other companies and industries can definitely be doing. As we work towards wrapping up this Congress, there's definitely a lot more opportunity and with Department of Energy, but also just with infrastructure. There's tons of grants that are available within the sector, and industries and companies should definitely be taking advantage of those.
Back to Aaron and Eugene. So with the Hydrogen Hub grant that's coming out, and for the audience member, the Department of Energy announced that there's going to be $8 billion available for hydrogen hubs around the nation. I think this could be anywhere from 4 to 8 of these hubs. Do you think Los Angeles will be one of those hubs?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think the challenge that we see, at least in the near term, is a lot of the hydrogen-powered aircraft that we're looking at are going to be relatively small, relatively short range. For us, we do have a lot of long flights, certainly out of Los Angeles. It's also a bit of a constrained airport, as I think everyone knows who's been there. And so we try to actually bring in our larger aircraft. So it's something I think we'd love to do. I'm sure customers there, it's probably one of the best places, in fact, from a customer appeal standpoint. But I think we also have to just think about the realities on our side of how do we run an efficient operation and actually meet all of that customer demand. We don't fly all 90 million customers in Los Angeles, but we have to certainly compete and try and serve them as best as possible. So hopefully someday, don't know exactly if it's going to be first on our list or perhaps a bit further down the line.
Yeah, Aaron, I think some people, when they think of SAF, they think of it as the renewable feedstocks that we make it out of. They're less sensitive to the fact that we use hydrogen to make SAF. And so the cleaner that hydrogen can be, the cleaner the SAF is. And so what we really provide our customer base is a means to decarbonize. And so it's not just we're not just trying to displace 1 gallon of traditional fuel with a gallon of new fuel. We're trying to make sure every day that gallon of new fuel is decarbonized as much as possible, so that we can get to a place where we can, in aggregate, decarbonize an industry more effectively. And so that's long before we're flying on hydrogen airplanes. We will be flying on much cleaner SAF because we've decarbonized the SAF, the hydrogen that we're making the SAF from. So to your question about should Southern California be one of the hydrogen hubs of America? I mean, if it's not, it's a travesty. It has to be Southern California. It absolutely has to be Southern California. There is no more obvious place to put one of these hubs than in Southern California. And if we don't cause that to happen, shame on us. That's right there. It needs to happen. There are places like Houston that are obvious places for a hydrogen hub, but certainly Southern California has to be.
Well, thank you for that. We will take that message and we'll make sure that we promote that. Part
Consider
of my
it
job,
a challenge, yeah.
Yeah, well, part of my job both at here at LADC and World Trade Center is about promoting Los Angeles. So, to have that vote of confidence, that will help us a lot in terms of telling the story of why LA. The other thing is this.
Sorry to interrupt, Stephen, but yeah. Can you imagine with the 2028 Olympics coming to Los Angeles that we would not be a hydrogen hub in Los Angeles?
Yeah, well, that's a really, really good point, because one of the things that we do, with the Los Angeles region is we work with our international partners, right? So in 2018, 2019, our friends over in Tokyo and the Japanese government has reached out to us to start talking about planning for the 2020, 2021 Olympic Games because of their transition into the hydrogen future and renewable energy future as well. And that was going to be the cleanest, greenest Olympic Games in history. And so every Olympic game that's going to come after, whether it's 2024 in Paris, whether it's going to be LA in 2028 or Brisbane in 2032, it's going to keep on having that trajectory. So we have to do that. And so as a host city and one of the very few host city for the 3rd time, we're very proud of that. But I also want to highlight, it's not just Olympic Games. We'll be hosting the FIFA World Cup in 2026. We'll be hosting WrestleMania. We'll be hosting US Open Championship for golf. We already won the Super Bowl, but all these mega events is going to demand a lot of international and domestic travelers to come to Los Angeles. So this renewable fuel transition is going to be so important. And one last note is this background that we have. I call it my propaganda picture, to really showcase Los Angeles, and it's a beautiful view. But we all know that Los Angeles hasn't always been like this, and back in the 60s, we used to be known as a smog capital of the United States. And it took years of public-private partnership, but basically getting policy changes and working with private sector to really transition for us to have days like these. So as we're moving forward, I think there's going to be a lot more that we need to do. So speaking of which, I'm going to transition back to Israel about specifically, again, looking from a micro perspective, this particular project from World Energy, wanted to see your perspective in terms of economic, environmental, and especially the community impact, because I think we have to look at it from a macro, meso, and also micro perspective in terms of what the benefits and what the challenges are. Can you talk a little bit about the impact to your district with this project? And hopefully, again, this will stimulate other projects that will go into this region.
Yeah, I think just starting with the economic impact with the jobs created by World Energy's operations. One, they're one of the few companies that pay above the county's medium wage, especially in southeastern Los Angeles. That's definitely something. By helping these families, if there's something local and something in their backyard, they're definitely going to want to work there. But also, World Energy participates with the project labor agreement, so that also provides just again a livable wage, and by hiring from within and locally, that's a really big plus, and it really benefits the district. And as you mentioned earlier, Stephen, I think just the positive environmental impact that Paramount has seen since 2018. We've moved away from the operation of crude refineries that ended permanently, and we hope to see just a decline in asthma and cancers. These are all things that constituents would call, and so these are good news. World Energy is definitely leading the way and heading in the right direction by helping reducing that environmental hazard. And also just with the community support for programs in schools, I think just creating a good pipeline to train people in these industries. These are invaluable skills that young adults or teenagers or people that are looking for a change in their career. This is an important skill. By having internship opportunities, by creating a pipeline, offering scholarships, this is definitely the right way to go. And I know for Paramount, will definitely benefit in a long way.
Thank you, Israel. And I want to start switching back and forth between some of the questions that are coming in from the audience member as well. And again, if you have any questions, please do put it in the Q&A chats. First question is, how is SAF compared to regular aviation fuel from a cost perspective? Will passengers see ticket prices go up with increasing use of SAF?
Well, Aaron, either one of us could probably take that, but we both have gotten that question about 1 million times. And I always think it's the wrong question. The question should be, how is SAF at reducing carbon in aviation versus other means of reducing carbon in aviation from a cost perspective? And in that way, I mean, SAF isn't the only thing that the aviation industry is doing to decarbonize. In fact, Aaron can speak to it better than I can, but there's a whole host of activities. But the problem for many of them is they're getting to diminishing returns to efficiency. So there's been a lot of progress made in the efficiency of engines and design and so forth in aviation, but you get to smaller and smaller incremental improvement on making these planes fly more efficiently. And now you have to get into the fuel tank if you're going to continue to make those improvements. And so SAF is an extremely cost-effective mechanism for reducing carbon in aviation at this point, given where all the other alternatives are in terms of their maturity. For the most part, I think that forward-thinking airlines are thinking about SAF as an offering to their customer base who really wants to decarbonize. There are big users around the world that are asking every day, how can we ship our goods or fly our people with a better carbon footprint? And if it's if they're not getting the answers from their suppliers in the aviation industry, they're kind of hands up, right? And these are scope 3 emissions in which major corporations from around the world are dependent on the airlines, and the airlines are dependent on us. And it's this whole ecosystem that is mutually dependent. Aaron, I don't know if you want to kind of build on that thought, but I think it's the wrong question to say, hey, can you produce a much better product at a lower price?
Yeah, and indeed, Gene, I like how you're reframing it here. And I would say what matters is not the cost, but what's the value? I mean, if we look at water, water is incredibly cheap in this country. But if we were to go and say, well, we don't need to spend any money on water because it's so cheap, we would have, in fact, a serious problem in terms of how we live our lives and how we feed ourselves every day. So water may be cheap, but it's incredibly valuable. And SAF today, yes, it is expensive, but it's incredibly valuable and necessary, just like water is, because it's the future of our industry. It's how we have that license to operate, in fact, in the future. To maybe address the question a bit more directly around ticket prices. Yes, today SAF is more expensive. There's no question about that. And that's why we did partner with many of our corporate customers in the Eco Skies Alliance program that we created, where they're actually funding that premium so we can go out and buy a lot more than we would otherwise. And as a result of that, we've been able to increase our SAF use by multiples, in fact. And next year it's going to go up multiples again, and the year after that, and so on. And eventually we get to a point where now all of a sudden that enables cost challenges around low production to come down, and hopefully someday, in fact, we get to an industry where SAF is not expensive. It's not 10x expensive like it was a decade ago. These days it's much lower, let's say 2 or 3, and then in the future, do we get it down to be something that's just barely above that of a conventional, and it's in fact everywhere, every day, without really a huge cost problem, in fact. That's what we want to have someday.
It reminds me of some of the conversation we were having like 2 decades ago about solar as well, right?
Yes.
And the price drop.
It's a fantastic example. It is and that's how innovation happens. Innovation doesn't happen where you just wait for the low cost solution to magically appear. The way innovation happens is you move and keep pushing and keep pushing, and that's how you continue to find improvements. And you don't get to innovate by standing still.
And Ezra, I know that your time is short, so I want to ask you whether you have any kind of final thoughts on the future of projects like this, right? Because again, from a transformational perspective, the world is looking into California, they're looking at Los Angeles for this leadership. And also they're looking at the potential community impact from job creation standpoint. And as you're mentioning with the PLA and the various ways of operating, what is from a federal level, what else should we be tracking and looking at as we're looking at the transition into these low carbon standards, or fuel standards?
Yeah, in September, the Biden administration, they had announced their goal in support of SAF, with wanting to produce 3 billion gallons of SAF, reduce aviation emissions by 20% by 2030, and to grow good paying jobs. And so that definitely sets the groundwork and the foundation to work towards achieving these goals. Will we meet everything by 2030? Probably not, but I think it definitely creates sparks the innovation within industry to really move towards these goals. We've talked about where we were 20 years ago in terms of just solar energy, and I think we're in the perfect place right now with an administration that support these goals. And so definitely looking forward to seeing what World Energy and other industries out there are working towards. And so, yeah, Stephen, you did mention that. I do have to hop off, but definitely, again, want to thank you all for this amazing panel, great insight, and please keep the Congresswoman's office here in mind, and we're definitely happy to serve as a resource for you all.
Thank you so much, Israel. Really appreciate it. Going back to some of the things that we were talking about before, I don't want it to just basically, kind of paint this rosy picture, right? Obviously, when it comes to decarbonization, especially when it comes to transportation sector, including aviation, it's not the simplest thing to do. So would love to get your thoughts in terms of, okay, what solutions are you bringing to the table that can make it a bit easier to decarbonize? Realistically, what is, like you mentioned, it's going to be multiple step. It's going to be potentially 10-year frame. Like what is the future looking like, and what products and what solutions can we be looking forward to?
Yeah, maybe if I can start first. You're right in that this isn't easy and it's not fast. For United, World Energy wasn't our first SAF partner. In fact, it was our fourth. The first three are no longer active in the space, and so it's something where it's not every startup is in fact going to make it, but our hope is that they are going to be able to learn well from these examples that have come before and figure out how to do it faster over time to accelerate really that progress basis for us. And really my biggest hope in this space is around how this becomes commonplace someday, in fact. And hardly a week goes by these days where there's not some kind of news in terms of sustainable aviation and what's happening next. And what I'd love to see someday is when we have a new agreement with a SAF producer, whether it's World Energy or someone else, we sign the contract, we look at each other and we say, we don't have to make an announcement about this because it's something that's just ubiquitous and is an everyday reality. So that's where I hope we get to, in fact, someday.
Yeah, I am completely with you, Aaron. There've been plenty of press announcements on related to SAF, and there will continue to be, but those announcements don't actually cause decarbonization. Action is what causes decarbonization. And once we get enough action that it's no longer newsworthy when there's another expansion of a SAF agreement, that's a great day. And just because, as you certainly know, just because we're not pumping out a press release every day does not mean we're not concluding long-term agreements for the offtake of this fuel. We're closely aligned with those who are also interested in long-term commitments to making this not just one plant in LA, but an industry, and that's what we're going to have to do. And we're making tremendous headway with the likes of United and others to do that. And it's not about press announcements; it's about taking the action and making these commitments.
And I saw on the guest list, the RSVP list, there are other airlines, there are other airplane manufacturers that are joining us today as well. So, and I know that they're joining across the nation, and some of them are international airlines as well. So with Gene, you mentioned earlier that your goal is to deliver to your customers, and their customers deliver to their customers as well. So in order to turn this into not a single project, but really a transformative change for the entire industry, for both Aaron and Gene, what are the things that need to be done at this point to really expedite the adoption from other airlines and other customers so that we can move forward a lot quicker?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the biggest and hardest thing is always to get started and to be willing to take some risks. In aviation and airlines in particular, we've always had a very strong safety culture, and a safety culture will often will discourage you from taking a risk when we need to be encouraging people to go ahead and take these risks when it comes to decarbonization, because it is going to take time, it is going to take a lot of effort to get there, and staying on the sideline isn't going to get it done. When I was in college, one of the things I did, and actually one of the best things I ever did in my life, was I learned to fly an airplane. And I had to do a lot of studying for it. I had to do a lot of reading for it. And a lot of airlines out there are studying and reading about SAF. But I will say that I learned a lot more, not from reading the book, but from getting in the cockpit and taking off and flying around and learning it and doing it firsthand. And that's, I think, what it takes is a willingness to go and take that risk and move forward and do something you've never done before. And in fact, try and go out and do something that's a first, something that's a world changer. So I'm proud of the record we've done to date on that. I would love it if we have many more airlines. And today we do. We have many more doing it, but we need even more beyond that.
Yeah, and I that's a fantastic answer. And I would just offer from our side, it's the flip side of that. It's to eliminate risk. It's to produce a high quality product that is proven to work every single time, that responds to the safety culture and embraces the safety culture that is commonplace in the aviation industry. And not only from a operation safety point of view, but from a commercial safety point of view. There is not an airline in the world whose best customers are not the best companies in the world. The best companies to an airline are the corporations that are growing and leading where the world's headed. And those companies, by definition, are engaging in decarbonization ahead of their peers. And so it becomes a real service to their customers when an airline, whether it's for goods or for people, can offer the service of lower carbon aviation. And so this has really got to be a collective effort. You know, the big beneficiary, of course, in this case is the community of LA. The great irony of this is that now, the closer you are to a refinery like ours, the cleaner your air is, because we also make ground fuels, and those ground fuels are dramatically lower in fine particulates. And those ground fuels get used as close to our refinery as possible. So the trucks rolling through your city now are dramatically cleaner, not only in atmospheric emissions, but in local emissions, where the fine particulates are the things that cause respiratory illness and really are the damaging part of diesel emissions. Our fuels are dramatically cleaner, much better. And so for the first time ever, you're actually in a healthier environment if you're located close to a refinery like ours. So anyway, this ends up being a very large continuum from these very big issues to very localized issues, and all working arm in arm. And we have to make things, we have to lower risk, and Aaron's absolutely right. Others have to start to see risk differently. The risk of action versus the risk of inaction.
So thank you both for that. Oh, sorry. Do you have something else to add, Aaron? No. Okay. So thank you both for that. We're running out of time here. So I want to thank you for your comments, and especially Jean for World Energy's investment into this community and this project in particular. As we heard throughout this discussion, the impact it's going to have on the community, on the job creation aspect, on the environment, and really transforming the future of the aviation sector, as well as having not only national but global impact, across the way. And there's going to be a lot more information you can actually get from the report. So I highly encourage all the audience member to follow up and go to ladc.org/research to download that report to look at all the great things that are happening and the significant impact. And also want to thank Aaron for your great work at United and your leadership and helping us shape the future of this sector. And then, of course, I want to thank Israel and the representative, Weber Dallard, for their leadership in environmental policies as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm sad that we're running out of time so quickly, but that's what happens when you're having fun. So hopefully we will have more of these conversations, and this is one of many. And please come join us at future LADC webinars. But again, want to thank our speakers for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.